Next speaker that I'd like to introduce is Joe Speicher, and Joe is running a startup. He never thought probably that he was going to run a startup again, but he's with the Autodesk Foundation, which is a 4-year-old organization here in the county, using the power of design to create a better world. And I really love Joe's background because he has this really interesting mix of Wall Street and Peace Corps and overseas service projects, and so he straddles that strange world of work and commerce with philanthropy and impact design. Impact design is a fairly new phenomena, and it really is about how designers can, or entrepreneurs, or business and community leaders can use design for changing the world for the better. So Autodesk, of course, is a global leader in 3D design and engineering, entertainment software, help people imagine and design a better world. So we love his, again, his background, and again, as one of the largest employers for the county, we felt it was important to have one of Autodesk leaders really talk about what they're doing globally, but also turn it inward and talk a little bit about what's happening here in Marin. So please welcome Joe Speicher.
Thank you. All right. Thanks, everybody. That's a hard act to follow, Congressman. But I'm going to try, and I'm going to take it from the business aspect as opposed to the public sector. So, and I'm going to wander around, so I like to be mobile while I'm talking. My name is Joe Speicher. I'm the executive director of the Autodesk Foundation, and I'm humbled and I'm excited to share with you guys some of my experiences and some of my thoughts and beliefs around how to integrate social and environmental impact with your businesses and in your work. I think, based on what I'm hearing this morning, is that I am preaching to the choir. And so what I hope to do is inspire you with some cool examples and get you thinking about this in a bit of a different way. So thank you, Chris, for the opportunity. Let's see if this works. Yes. So as Chris mentioned, I started my career on Wall Street, which is probably why I work in philanthropy. I have lots of sins to atone for from my previous work there. But this was the year 2000. I started working in a derivatives group at Deutsche Bank. And I worked with brilliant people on really challenging problems, mostly math problems. And I thought, this is great. Life is wonderful. I have a wonderful job. I couldn't be happier. And then September 11th happened. And I began to think, what does all this matter if the fabric of society is being pulled apart? Why am I doing what I'm doing? So that took me down a path where I chose to leave my job on Wall Street and move to go to the Peace Corps. And there are other Peace Corps, returned Peace Corps volunteers in the audience. We're a strong network. That was probably one of the hardest things I had to do, was explain to my managing director at Deutsche Bank that I was leaving the country for 3 years to forego income and volunteer my time in a developing nation. And I thought at the time that I was probably not going to come back to the private sector. I thought, I think I can have the biggest impact in working in the social and nonprofit sectors. And yet, I gotta point it at the thing. That way? There we go. And yet, I find myself here at Autodesk. So I'm sure all of you are familiar with Autodesk as a company, given that it's about a 5-minute walk down the road, or 2-minute walk down the road. We make software for people who make things, buildings, products, and your favorite Marvel movie characters, special effects. So at Autodesk, we're thinking about the built environment and physical things. If you've experienced driving a car, using a smartphone, living in a building or an living in a house or an office building that's been renovated or built since 1985, you've experienced what millions of our customers are doing with our products. And that is one hell of an impact. If we can steer those resources, those design and engineering resources, towards positive impact, that is a huge ripple effect. So as Chris mentioned, a couple years ago, I should stop wandering around because it's not letting, there we go. We decided to create a foundation about 4 years ago. And they said, we need somebody looking at the long term. What's happening and where should we, where is the future of our markets and the future of society? And so when we look at 2050, we're going to have 10 billion people on the planet. We're at 7.6, 7.7 now. So that's a 35% increase in what we have today. 3/4 of those people are going to be living in urban areas. We're slightly over 50% today. That's a huge increase over the next 3 decades. 5 billion people will be in the global consuming middle class. That's more than double the 2 billion that we have today. And in order to fulfill all of these needs of consumers and people, we're going to need 2 times as much energy. When you boil that down to its core, these are design challenges. The implications for the built environment, for cities, for transportation, for industrial production and manufacturing are huge across all of these. So we need to start designing and engineering a better world that will allow us to steer the ship in the direction of positive impact. So we created a foundation. There we go. Whose mandate? This is about 4.5 years ago. The mandate of the foundation is to support the design and creation of innovative solutions to the world's most pressing environmental and social challenges. We were co-located with our sustainability group at Autodesk, who some of you might be familiar with. We have lots of great sustainability programs as well. We help our customers be more sustainable. But the foundation's mandate is thus. And therefore, we work in 3 areas. There we go. No delay. We work in 3 areas: low carbon innovation, healthy and resilient communities, sorry guys, and workforce development. And I will talk about each of these in turn. But we believe that as a philanthropic institution, this is where we can have the most impact. Now, if you want to boil this down to its most simple, low carbon innovation is carbon emission reduction. Healthy and resilient communities is climate adaptation. And workforce development is an equality issue. And I'll talk more about that. But my belief is, and you could argue with me about this, but I think that the 2 biggest existential challenges that we face as a society are climate change and inequality. And you can boil any challenge down to that. And our foundation is trying to play in that space and be catalytic where we can. So what's wonderful about Autodesk as a company is that we have all of these resources within the company to leverage. So many philanthropic institutions write checks. We all write checks, probably at the end of the year when you get 5,200 emails reminding you that you get a tax write-off. That's what a lot of philanthropies do. As a corporate philanthropy, we get the opportunity to leverage the intellectual and human capital of our company. And I'll give you a couple examples of that. So I think about this in 3 pillars, 3 versions of capital. Financial capital, which is our funding. Intellectual capital, which is our software and technical assistance. And then finally, our human capital, and that's our people. So how do we leverage all those things across the company to do good? And here is one interesting example. So how many folks remember the 2015 Nepal earthquake? It happened a while ago. Today, people are still retrofitting and rebuilding homes in Nepal because of that earthquake. We work with a partner called Build Change, who builds back better after natural disasters, mostly in developing countries, mostly after earthquakes and tsunamis. We took a team of 10 Autodesk employees and sent them over to Nepal to help with what they were doing. It traditionally took them 3 days to assess a building or home whether it needed to be demolished or retrofitted to be fixed. The team from Autodesk, who included folks from here in Marin, actually got that process down to 3 hours, so that they could scale that program across all of their countries in which they're working, and be incredibly more productive. That, to me, is Autodesk at its best, leveraging our expertise to help deliver societal impact. It's kind of a fun example. So this is our portfolio of organizations that we support. We support over 40 organizations globally, including many here in the Bay Area, and many abroad. We are location agnostic. We will support any organization that fulfills our mandate and is delivering impact. Last year, we gave away roughly $5 million, but that is dwarfed by our intellectual and human capital support, $20 million in what I would consider technical assistance, and 26,000 hours of employee time given to these causes. So, what do we look for when we look for folks that we want to support? Well, the first one is solving a real problem. Oh, we're reversed. I guess we're going to go for innovative design is the first problem that we look for. And there are, yeah, I don't know. I might just load all of these. Scalable models, impact measurement, solving real problems, and a strong management team. So we are rigorous in our assessment of the partners in which we work. And it's a little bit different, and I think it's a little bit of a mind shift in ensuring that organizations are delivering impact, they're solving real problems, they have the people on board to actually deliver on that, and it's scalable. It can reach a significant number of people. We think that that's incredibly important given the size of the challenges that we have today. So here's a couple of quick examples. Low carbon innovation. This is carbon emission reduction. This is typically, most of our resources here are US based, and it's focused on emitting countries that have high carbon emissions, of which the US is up there. However, we're looking for innovation. So you would think that China would be on that list. There's not a lot of innovation coming out of China with regards to low carbon. So most of our investments here are in the US. Now, additionally, the interesting stuff in low carbon emissions is happening in the private sector. So much of our activity here is actually investments. That is also a new thing for philanthropies. Many people call it impact investing. And this is a new area where many philanthropies have a corpus, and they typically invest to get the highest return, and then give away 5%. That's the endowed model. Many philanthropies are using their corpus to make investments now that have societal benefits, and we're doing the same. We've just begun to dip our toe in this. We've participated in a couple of funds that are funding low-carbon technologies. Here's one example that I think is really cool. Has anybody heard of BioLite? Yes, awesome. BioLite is a premier Autodesk customer, not only because they use a very complicated product called computational fluidity dynamics to help make their products incredibly energy efficient, but they operate in 2 markets. Here, you can go buy a BioLite stove at REI. Does anybody have a BioLite stove? They are very cool, and they do this amazing thing where they can charge a cell phone off the heat of the stove. If you don't believe it, it really works. It's because the energy is so efficient within the stove itself. The dual use of the stove in developing countries has impact. So they actually sell the stove in South Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa because it does 2 things. It reduces indoor air pollution, and it reduces the need for fuel, and therefore the cost to the family. So a product here that you can go buy at REI, Lowe's, many sporting goods stores, is having impact in countries overseas, which I think is a wonderful example. And also, it's a commercial entity. So we are providing grant funding to a for-profit company. because of their impact. Healthy and resilient communities, this is a very broad tent. We look at vulnerable communities. So that might be here in the Bay Area, where we're vulnerable to climate change, or vulnerable communities in the developing world that are vulnerable to, it might be drought, it might be economic impacts, et cetera. One really fun example of this is Resilient by Design. How many people are familiar with this program? Oh, like everybody. Awesome. For those of you who are not, there's a few hands that weren't raised in the room. This was born out of Superstorm Sandy in New York. So Superstorm Sandy hit the New York tri-state area. The HUD, federal government, had funds to deploy for rebuilding after Superstorm Sandy. And they knew that they were just going to build back the same as before. And so they went out and they recruited the Rockefeller Foundation and they said, help us build back better. So Rockefeller created a competition that was called Rebuild by Design, where they solicited the best designers in the world. So this includes names such as Gensler, Arup, AECOM, BIG, the Bjarke Angels Group, to say, how can we redesign New York, New Jersey, Connecticut to withstand more storms? And those projects are being built now. So actually, one of the projects is called the Dry Line in Lower Manhattan. It's actually a storm break for when the next storm surge comes. There's also a really interesting example of an architecture firm building what they call oyster texture. Oyster beds are actually natural filters, as many of you I'm sure know. They also are storm breaks, and so they're trying to repopulate the Hudson and the East River with oysters and building the structures in order to do that. So what Rockefeller said is, we need to do this in the Bay Area, not after an event, but before the event actually takes place. Prevention rather than treatment. And so they funded a project here, Resilient by Design, that did the exact same thing. They brought together the world's top designers and said, how do we fix the coming sea level rise within the Bay Area? That resulted in 10 amazing projects from amazing design firms. I would encourage you to go look at the website and see. 3 of them are here in the North Bay, and 2 specific to Marin. One's in Marin City, the other is in Santa Fe here. Really interesting projects. Now, the opportunity is to get those projects funded. So we have these beautiful designs. There is no HUD that has these funds to deploy for an emergency. But currently, we're working with Resilient by Design to figure out how we're going to get some of these projects moving forward in the Bay Area. Another really fun example, I say fun tongue-in-cheek, a really interesting example is the United Nations High Commission for Refugees. So we at Autodesk work very closely with UNHCR. This is the UN agency that's responsible for housing the 65 million, somebody like that, the 65 million refugees globally. So, and that number is climbing every year. 20 million of those refugees need housing, and that's what UNHCR does. They have a site and settlements committee, site and settlements division that does this. We work closely with them to make better refugee sites. And so we had a situation in the last year where roughly 700,000 to 800,000 Rohingya refugees fled Myanmar over into neighboring Bangladesh. They did so very quickly, and they did what's called self-settlement, where they just chose a spot to settle. Many of those areas were actually flood and landslide prone. And so it was right on the typhoon circuit. And so the UNHCR said, we have to get these people out of these areas immediately. We sent a team over. We worked with them to actually design a new site so that they could build very quickly and resettle all those folks. We are currently amidst typhoon season over in Bangladesh. And myself and my team have been watching, and it's actually been successful. They've resettled 40,000 families over there, and there hasn't been any major events, which is exciting. Yeah. So these are examples of using design and engineering tools to improve society. And in this case, it's specific to saving lives, which I think is really interesting and fascinating. Workforce development. I won't talk too much about this, but this is a new area for us. And we at Autodesk, we see the introduction of automation and artificial intelligence tools into the workplace coming very quickly. How many folks have Alexa or Google Home? Oh, couple? Yeah. I had Alexa. I got rid of her because I caught her listening to me when she shouldn't be. But this is coming into the workplace very soon. And it's going to radically change how we work. And so we are thinking about what are the investments that we need to make today to ensure that the workforce is set up for success in the future when these tools are deployed. One of the things that we did was work with an organization called Village Capital. They are a nonprofit accelerator and investor to say, how can we use automation and AI for good to help workers? And so they brought together a cohort of startups that were doing just that. A lot of it was upskilling the workforce, removing bias in the hiring process, and job matching, helping folks find the right jobs through automation and AI. So I believe that using these tools for good to solve a lot of our problems can be really impactful. So what's the result? We have 40 organizations that we're supporting across the Autodesk portfolio, and last year they offset 700,000 metric tons of CO2 collectively. And that number is understated because we tend to work in the earlier stage with companies, so much of their carbon emission potential is pro forma. It's not actually realized yet. But I believe the investments we're making today are going to have huge impacts on that tomorrow. And so in future, we want to calculate the net present value of what our actual carbon emissions are. So that's an understated number, but it's significant. It's equivalent to all of Autodesk's carbon emissions for that same year. Autodesk as a global company of 10,000 employees working over 65,000 offices and using significant cloud infrastructure. So it's not immaterial. In addition, those partners reached 11 million people globally. And so I want to continue to see how we can make these catalytic investments that actually help people across the globe and get us to the society that we want to see. And for those of you that are familiar with Autodesk, we have a new CEO, and he's been leading with a message of impact. We as a company need to be helping our customers make more, because more is inevitable. We're going to have 10 billion people on the planet. But we need to help make more things, but make them better, like the examples that I gave, and with less negative impact on the planet. And so we came out with a really strong message around this. This is now in our corporate mission statement, is helping customers do more, better, with less negative impact on the planet. And we're leading that. I think that's a function of being located here in Marin. It's also a function of, as the Congressman mentioned, what's happening in Washington. Businesses realize that we have to do more. We have to step up to actually accelerate the transition to the low carbon economy. And so we're not going to do this alone, but we're going to do our part where we can and try to inspire others to do so. And I hope that you guys are inspired today to do the same as you think about your businesses, your work, what you might do in this same vein. So I thank you very much for the time. I feel grateful to have been given the opportunity. And I'll be around if there's any questions about Autodesk. Thank you very much.